If you've noticed that your morning walk to the kitchen feels slightly different than it did a year ago, that your feet seem to land a little less certainly on the floor, that your shoulder occasionally brushes the doorframe when it never used to, pay close attention to what I'm about to share with you, because that small, almost invisible shift in the way you walk is not random. It is not simply getting older, and it is not, as so many people are told, something you just have to accept. It is a signal, a very specific one, and your body has been sending it for longer than you realize. My name is Dr. Andrew Collins, and in the next 20 minutes, I want to walk you through something that affects nearly every adult past the age of 70, yet is almost never explained properly, not in a 15-minute doctor's visit, not in the pamphlets they hand you at the clinic, and certainly not on the evening news. I'm talking about the quiet, gradual loss of straight, confident walking, the kind of walking you used to do without thinking, the kind that, somewhere along the way, started requiring just a little more attention, a little more effort, a little more caution. You may already be noticing it. A subtle drift to one side when you walk down a hallway, a feeling that your feet are heavier than they should be, a sense that your balance recalibrates a half-second slower than it once did. Maybe you've caught yourself reaching for a wall, a counter, the back of a chair, not because you needed to, but because something inside you whispered that it might be wise. If any of that sounds familiar, I want you to take a slow breath and listen carefully, because what's happening inside your body right now is not what most people think it is. And the good news, and there is genuinely good news, is that almost all of it can be quieted, slowed, and in many cases reversed, if you understand the mechanism early enough. And before we go any further, I want to give you something you can use tonight. In just a few minutes, I'll share a simple 20-second balance exercise, something you can do beside your kitchen counter, that many of my older patients tell me made them feel more stable the very first time they tried it. So stay with me, because that small moment alone is worth the time you'll spend here. Let me explain what's actually going on beneath the surface. Walking, as simple as it looks, is one of the most complex things the human nervous system does. Every single step requires your brain, your inner ear, your eyes, the tiny nerves in the soles of your feet, and the deep muscles along your spine to communicate in perfect rhythm, hundreds of times per minute. When you were 40, that communication was instant, invisible. But somewhere after 70, three quiet systems inside the body begin to slow down. Not break, not fail, just slow. And it's the slowing, not any single disease, that begins to change the way you walk. The first system is called proprioception. It's your body's ability to know where it is in space without looking, the reason you can touch your nose with your eyes closed, or step off a curb in the dark and somehow know exactly how far down the ground is. The nerves carrying that information run from the soles of your feet all the way up to your brain. After 70, the insulation around those nerves thins slightly, so the signals arrive a fraction of a second later than they used to. That tiny delay is the first reason your walking changes. The second system is your inner ear, a tiny set of fluid-filled canals that tell your brain whether you are upright, tilting, or turning. By 75, the delicate hair cells inside those canals have quietly lost nearly 40% of their original function. You don't feel this directly. You don't wake up dizzy. But your brain, which used to receive crisp balance signals, now receives a slightly fuzzier version. And to compensate, it tightens the muscles around your hips, lower back, and shoulders without your permission. That hidden bracing is why so many people over 70 describe feeling stiff without any clear injury. And the third system, the one almost never discussed in a regular checkup, is the small network of blood vessels feeding the deep muscles along your spine and pelvis. These are not the muscles you see in the mirror. These are the silent stabilizers, the ones that hold your trunk upright the way guy wires hold up a tall antenna. When the tiny vessels feeding them narrow with age, the muscles don't fail outright. They simply fatigue faster. By the time you've walked from your bedroom to your front door, they are already tired in a way they never used to be. So picture all three of these systems, your foot nerves, your inner ear, your deep stabilizers, each running at about 70 or 80% of their original capacity. None of them are broken. None would show up on a standard medical test, but together they create exactly the pattern you may be experiencing right now. A walk that feels slightly less certain, slightly less straight, slightly more effortful than it used to. And here is where I want to be honest with you about something that frustrates a lot of my older patients. Most doctors don't catch this early, not because they aren't skilled and not because they don't care, but because the standard tools of a general appointment simply weren't designed to detect this slow, multi-system slowdown. A blood test won't show it. An X-ray won't show it. Even an MRI of the brain often comes back perfectly normal. The doctor sees no disease, no fracture, no stroke, and concludes reasonably that everything is fine. They may tell you it's just age. They may tell you to be careful on the stairs. They may, with the best of intentions, send you home with no plan at all. But you are not imagining what you feel. And I want you to understand something deeper, something I've watched unfold patient after patient for over 20 years. Losing confidence in your walking is rarely just about walking. It is about independence. It is about whether you still feel free to drive yourself to the grocery store, to visit your grandchildren without help, to step out into your own garden without someone hovering nearby. Most older adults I've worked with don't truly fear falling itself. What they fear is what happens after a fall. The loss of freedom, the loss of self-reliance, the slow narrowing of a life they spent decades building. That fear is not weakness, it is wisdom, and it is exactly why catching these early signs matters so much. Before I take you through those signs, I want to tell you about someone. I'll call her Margaret. She was 78 when she first came to see me, and what brought her in was not pain, not dizziness, not a fall. It was her mailbox. For nearly 40 years she had walked down her own driveway every morning to collect her mail, but over the course of a single summer she had quietly stopped. She told me she had begun to drift slightly to one side on the way back up the drive, and one morning she had to put her hand on the side of her car to steady herself. No one saw it. Nothing dramatic happened. But she went inside, sat down at her kitchen table, and decided the mail could wait for her son's visits on weekends. She thought it was simply age. She thought it was the beginning of the end of doing things on her own. Hold on to Margaret's story, because I'm going to come back to her, and what happens 6 weeks later may surprise you. Now let me walk you through the signs. There are 7. Each one is a little darker than the one before. Not to frighten you, but because recognition is the single most powerful thing you can do right now. The first sign is the one almost everyone dismisses. You begin to look down at the floor more often when you walk. Not constantly, just a little more than you used to. You glance at the carpet edge. You check the threshold between rooms. You watch your feet on stairs in a way you didn't 10 years ago. This is your brain, very intelligently, trying to use your eyes to replace the slightly delayed signals coming from your feet. It is compensation. It is not weakness, but it is the first whisper that the system underneath has begun to change. The second sign is a subtle shortening of your stride. Your steps become a little smaller, a little more cautious. You may not notice it yourself, but the people who walk beside you sometimes do. They find themselves slowing down, or you find yourself falling slightly behind. This shortening is not laziness, and it is not pain. It is your nervous system reducing the time each foot spends in the air, because the air is where you are least stable. Shorter steps mean less risk. Your body is protecting you, but at the cost of fluidity. The third sign is the one I want you to pay the most attention to. It is a faint, almost imperceptible drift when you walk in a straight line. If you've ever noticed that you tend to brush against one side of a hallway, or that you end up slightly off-center when walking through a doorway, or that walking on a sidewalk feels easier when there's a curb to anchor your eye to, that drift is your inner ear and your foot nerves trying to negotiate without quite agreeing. It is one of the earliest reliable signs that the balance system is recalibrating, and it is the sign most people only recognize when something more serious finally forces them to look back and connect the dots. But the fourth sign surprises almost everyone, so stay with me, because this is where the picture sharpens. The fourth sign is a change in how you turn, not how you walk forward, how you turn. Healthy turning, the kind you did effortlessly at 50, happens in a single smooth motion. Your head leads, your shoulders follow, your hips rotate, your feet pivot. By 75, in many people, that single motion quietly breaks into 2 or 3 smaller motions. You turn your head, pause, then turn your shoulders, pause, then move your feet. It feels normal from the inside, but from the outside, it looks like a small hesitation. And inside the body, it means your brain no longer trusts all 3 balance systems to fire at once. It is now sequencing them, one at a time, to keep you safe. The 5th sign is a quiet asymmetry. One leg begins to feel slightly different from the other, maybe a little heavier, maybe a little weaker, maybe just a little slower to respond when you go up a step. This is rarely a problem with the leg itself. It is almost always a sign that the nerves feeding that leg, or the small blood vessels supporting them, are aging slightly faster on one side. The body tolerates this for a long time, but once you notice it, the clock has started. And before I go further, here is the simple test I promised you. Tonight, when the house is quiet, stand beside your kitchen counter. Rest one hand lightly on it, not gripping, just resting. Then lift one foot off the floor and try to balance on the other leg for 10 seconds. Then switch. If it feels noticeably harder than it did 3 or 4 years ago, or if one side feels distinctly weaker than the other, your body may already be showing one of the earlier signs we just discussed. This is not a reason to panic. It is a reason to begin. Remember how that test feels tonight, because by the end of what I'm about to share with you, you'll know exactly what to do with that information. The 6th sign is when stairs begin to feel like a project. Not impossible, not painful, just something you think about now. You plan the descent, you hold the rail more firmly, you lead with the same foot every time. Stairs are where all 3 systems are tested simultaneously, and when they start to feel like work, it means the reserve capacity in all 3 has dropped below a comfortable margin. There is still plenty of function left, but the cushion is thinner than it once was. And the 7th sign, the one most people regret ignoring, is when you begin to avoid. Avoid uneven ground. Avoid walking in the dark. Avoid crowded places where someone might bump into you. Avoid the grocery store at busy hours. Avoid stepping off the porch when it's raining. This avoidance is intelligent. It is your nervous system telling you correctly that the margin for error has narrowed. But here's the painful paradox. The more you avoid, the faster the systems decline, because all 3 of them, proprioception, inner ear, and deep stabilizers, are use-dependent. They shrink when they are not challenged. So the very caution that protects you in the short term accelerates the decline in the long term unless something interrupts the pattern. And there is one specific moment where, for most people, that pattern locks in. Most assume it would be a fall. It isn't. What actually triggers it may surprise you. The tipping point usually arrives not with a fall, but with a near fall. A moment in the kitchen, or on the back step, or getting out of the car, where you catch yourself just in time. Your heart races. You steady yourself on something. You take a breath and tell yourself you're fine. And you are fine at that moment. But something inside your brain just registered that event as a threat. And from that day forward, often without you realizing it, your nervous system begins walking you differently, more cautiously, more stiffly, with shorter steps, tighter hips, less hip rotation, and a slightly forward-leaning posture that feels safer but is actually less stable in the long run. Once that protective pattern sets in, the 3 slowing systems begin to decline faster because they are being used less and less in their full range. The inner ear gets fewer signals to interpret. The foot nerves get fewer varied surfaces to read. The deep stabilizers get fewer demands placed on them. And within 12 to 18 months of that first near fall, many people cross a line where straightening their walk again requires a much more deliberate effort. That is the tipping point. And the reason I am telling you this so directly is that you almost certainly have not crossed it yet, even if you've had a near fall or 2. The window is still open. It is, in fact, wider than most people believe, but it does not stay open forever. So let me give you the quiet reversal. Not a workout program, not a list of supplements, just the principles that, applied gently and consistently, can restore a remarkable amount of straight, confident walking, even well into your 80s. The first principle is to give your feet something to feel again. The nerves in the soles of your feet have spent decades inside soft socks and cushioned shoes, reading almost no information from the ground. To wake them up, spend 2 or 3 minutes a day walking barefoot inside your home on a variety of safe surfaces, a rug, a tile floor, a folded towel. The goal is not exercise, the goal is sensation. You are reminding the nerves they have a job to do. The second principle is to challenge your inner ear gently and daily. This does not mean spinning in circles. It means turning your head while you walk, looking left, looking right, looking up at a shelf, then back down, all while walking slowly down a hallway with a wall nearby for safety. The vestibular system responds to demand when you stop turning your head while walking, and most people over 70 quietly do. The system weakens. When you start again, even for a minute or two a day, it begins to recover. The third principle is to rebuild your deep stabilizers, and this is the 20-second exercise I promised you at the beginning. Stand beside your kitchen counter, lightly rest one hand on it, lift one foot just an inch off the floor, and hold for 20 seconds. Then switch. Do this 3 or 4 times throughout the day, while the kettle boils, while you brush your teeth, while you wait for the microwave. That single, simple movement activates the deep stabilizers along your spine and pelvis more effectively than almost anything else, and it forces your inner ear and foot nerves to communicate in real time. Within 3 weeks, most of my patients tell me they feel noticeably steadier, not because their muscles got bigger, but because their nervous system woke up. The fourth principle is to walk a little, often, not a lot, occasionally. 5 minutes after breakfast. 5 minutes after lunch, 5 minutes after dinner, on varied surfaces if you can. Grass, a slight slope, a quiet sidewalk. The variety is the medicine, the frequency is the dosage. And the fifth principle, which I want you to hold on to more than any other, is this. Do not avoid the very thing your body is telling you is hard. Approach it instead, gently, in small doses, with safety nearby. Every system that has slowed in your body has slowed because it has been asked for less. Asking for a little more, kindly, patiently, daily, is how you restore it. Now let me come back to Margaret. 6 weeks after she first told me about her mailbox, she walked into my office on her own, without her son, and sat down with a small, almost embarrassed smile. She had started with the counter exercise, 20 seconds on each leg, 3 times a day. She added 2 minutes of barefoot standing on the rug beside her bed each morning. She began turning her head while walking down her own hallway. And one Tuesday, without planning it, she walked down her driveway, opened the mailbox, and walked back up, straight, steady, and entirely on her own. She told me she cried in her kitchen afterward, not because of the mail, but because she had quietly believed that part of her life was finished. It wasn't. It had only been waiting for someone to explain what was actually happening and what to do about it. Margaret's story is not unusual. I see versions of it nearly every week, and the reason I'm telling you hers is because somewhere in what I've described today, you may have recognized yourself. That recognition is the beginning, not the end of something. The beginning. So before you go, I want to ask you to do one small thing. In the comments below, tell me which of these 7 signs you noticed in yourself as I was describing them. Was it looking down? The shortened stride? The drift in the hallway? The change in how you turn? The asymmetry in your legs? The stares that now require thought? Or the quiet avoidance? Just naming it out loud or in writing is often the very first step toward reversing it, and reading what others share may help you feel less alone in what you've been quietly noticing. If today helped something click into place for you, stay with me for that one. There is much more worth understanding. You still have time, more than you think. Go gently. Start tonight with 20 seconds beside your kitchen counter. That is not a small thing. That is the first step of walking straight, confidently, and on your own, for many good years still ahead of you.